May 1st, 1945. The world waits. Rumors begin to leak out of Berlin. Hitler has vanished. The underground bunker is silent. Soviet tanks are in the streets of the German capital. The Third Reich, the empire that was supposed to last 1,000 years, is now collapsing in only its 12th year. But the war is not over yet. Europe is about to witness one final week of confusion, fear, surrender, and political calculation. Millions of German soldiers are still deployed across the continent, from Norway to Italy, from Czechoslovakia to Denmark, from the Baltic coast to the Alpine valleys. All of them are waiting for the final order. Surrender or continue fighting. Stay in position or flee west. Lay down their weapons or try to escape the Red Army. In northern Germany, in the town of Flensburg, Admiral Dönitz assumes power. Hitler has named him as his successor in his final testament. The former commander of Germany's U-boat fleet now finds himself president of a state that no longer truly exists. His task is almost impossible. He must manage the end of a war Germany has already lost. He must preserve what remains of a defeated army. And he must somehow protect a shattered civilian population trapped between revenge, hunger, and chaos. Dönitz knows the truth. The game is over, but he wants time. Every extra hour matters. His goal is simple. Move as many German soldiers and civilians as possible from east to west, away from areas soon to be controlled by the Soviets, toward the lines of the Americans and British. Every day, he can delay a complete surrender, may save tens of thousands from Soviet captivity. In London, Winston Churchill waits for the moment he has dreamed of for 5 long years. From the summer of 1940, when Britain stood alone against Hitler, to the spring of 1945, when Germany is surrounded from every side, the road has been long and painful. The Blitz over London, defeat in France, the battles in North Africa, the Atlantic convoys, the invasion of Normandy, the slow march into Germany. Now at last, victory is within reach. But Churchill is not only relieved, he is worried. He sees what others are only beginning to understand. Stalin is expanding across Eastern Europe. Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, and much of Central Europe are falling into the Soviet orbit. The war against Nazism is ending, but a new struggle is beginning. The Iron Curtain is about to divide Europe in two. Victory today, danger tomorrow. In Washington, the new American president, Harry Truman, faces the greatest responsibility of his life. He has been in the White House for only 3 weeks. Franklin D. Roosevelt died on April 12th. Truman inherited a world war on 2 fronts. The war in Europe is nearly finished, but the war against Japan still rages in the Pacific. And in a secret place in the desert of New Mexico, the Manhattan Project is approaching completion. The most dangerous weapon in history is almost ready. The Second World War is ending. But the world that will follow, it is being born in uncertainty, suspicion, and fire. Part 1. Berlin falls. On May 2nd, 1945, Berlin formally surrenders to the Soviet Army. The capital of the Reich has become a landscape of ruins. The city that once staged torchlight parades, military triumphs, and speeches promising eternal German glory now lies broken beneath smoke and dust. 9 out of every 10 buildings are either destroyed or badly damaged. Streets are blocked by rubble. Tram lines hang loose. Water pipes are broken. Electricity is gone. Food is nearly impossible to find. Civilians hide in cellars. Families emerge from basements after days of shelling to discover that their streets no longer exist. The heart of Hitler's empire has stopped beating. Hundreds of thousands of German soldiers lay down their weapons. Some are stunned. Some are exhausted. Some are relieved simply to be alive. Others fear what comes next. For the Soviets, Berlin is not just a military prize. It is the symbol of victory. After 4 years of unimaginable suffering, after the siege of Leningrad, the ruins of Stalingrad, the burned villages of Belarus and Ukraine, the Red Army has reached the enemy capital. Soviet soldiers stand in the streets of Berlin, knowing that the war has cost their country more than any other nation on earth. But victory brings no instant peace. In Berlin, violence, hunger, revenge, and survival mix together. The German state has collapsed. Police authority has vanished. The Nazi Party has disappeared almost overnight. The symbols remain, but the power is gone. The Führer is dead. The capital has surrendered. Yet across Europe, the war continues in fragments, and millions of people begin to move. Part 2. The Great Movement West. On May 3rd, the roads of Europe become the scene of one of the largest human movements in history. 10 million people are moving at once. German soldiers try to reach American lines. German civilians flee from eastern territories. Forced laborers, liberated from factories and camps, try to return home. Allied prisoners of war begin walking toward freedom. Refugees move in every direction, carrying whatever they can hold. The railways are broken. Bridges are destroyed. Roads are cratered by bombs. Vehicles have no fuel. Still, people move. On foot, by bicycle, with carts, with horses, with wheelbarrows, with children in their arms and old people beside them. Their destination is uncertain, but their instinct is clear. Move west, away from the Soviet advance, away from the unknown, toward the Americans and British, who are feared less than the Red Army. Stories about Soviet captivity spread everywhere. Some are true, some are exaggerated. All are enough to drive panic. German soldiers tear off insignia. Officers disguise themselves as ordinary troops. Some destroy documents. Others try to blend into columns of civilians. Nurses, clerks, wounded soldiers, mechanics, drivers, and administrators all move in the same direction. This is not only a military defeat, it is a civilization in flight. American cameramen film the roads. They capture endless lines of exhausted people stretching for miles. Faces hollow from hunger, boots broken, uniforms filthy, children silent from shock, old men pushing carts, women carrying bundles wrapped in sheets. Europe has become a continent of displaced people. The fighting is ending, but the suffering is not. Part 3. Patton reaches Czechoslovakia. In the west, General George S. Patton's American forces push eastward with remarkable speed. His tanks cover 30 to 40 kilometers a day. His orders are clear. Keep advancing. Do not stop unless told. Every kilometer taken by the Americans is a kilometer the Soviets will not take. Patton understands the political meaning of the battlefield. The war against Germany is almost finished, but the line between Western and Soviet influence is already being drawn on the map. On May 5th, Patton's forces reach the Czech city of Pilsen. The people pour into the streets. Czech flags hang from windows. 6 years of German occupation are ending. Flowers are thrown onto American tanks. Women cry with relief. Men shake the hands of soldiers. Children run beside armored vehicles. For the people of Pilsen, the arrival of the Americans is not simply military liberation. It is the return of life after years of fear. The German commander in the city, General von Maevsky, faces a brutal choice. He has around 15,000 soldiers. But the Americans are better supplied, better armed, and advancing with overwhelming force. Resistance would destroy the city. Surrender might save his men and the civilians. At 12:15 in the afternoon, he signs the surrender. His decision spares Pilsen from a battle that could have turned liberation into disaster. But elsewhere in Czechoslovakia, the situation is very different. In Prague, the capital, fighting continues. On May 5th, the Czech resistance rises against German occupation. Barricades appear in the streets. Radio broadcasts call for help. Civilians fight with captured weapons, pistols, rifles, and whatever they can find. German troops strike back. The city becomes a battlefield. The Red Army is approaching from the east. The Americans are halted farther west. Prague lies in a gray zone, and no one knows who will arrive first. Field Marshal Ferdinand Schorner commands the last major German army group in Bohemia. More than 500,000 German troops remain under his authority. Schorner is a fanatical Nazi to the end. He refuses to surrender. He orders his men to hold their positions. But the situation is hopeless. He is surrounded from east and west. Supplies are collapsing. Fuel is nearly gone. Ammunition is low. There is no hope of victory. Only delay. And delay means more dead men in a war that is already lost. Part 4. The surrender at Reims. On May 5th, a German aircraft lands at Reims in France. From its steps, Colonel General Alfred Jodl, Chief of Operations of the German Armed Forces High Command. He is 55 years old. His face is drawn and exhausted. The war has consumed him. Now he has come to perform a mission no German commander wants: to negotiate surrender. Jodl carries instructions from Admiral Dönitz. His task is not to surrender immediately to all the Allies. His task is to buy time. Try to arrange surrender to the Americans and British only. Keep fighting the Soviets if possible. Delay long enough for more German troops and civilians to reach the West. But the mission is almost impossible. The Allies have already agreed. Germany must surrender unconditionally, and the surrender must apply to all fronts. No separate peace. No escape from the Soviets. No negotiations that divide the Allies at the final hour. At Allied headquarters in Reims, the talks begin. Jodl argues. He requests delays. He pleads for time. But General Dwight D. Eisenhower is firm. Either Germany signs a complete surrender immediately, or Allied bombing will resume against German targets with all available force. Jodl understands the message. There is no room left to maneuver. On May 6th, a message arrives from Flensburg. Dönitz gives permission. Sign. The clock passes midnight. It is now May 7th. At 2:39 in the morning, history reaches one of its decisive moments. Jodl sits at the table. Before him lies the instrument of surrender. His hand holds the pen. For a moment, he hesitates. He knows what this signature means. The end of the Third Reich. The end of Hitler's dream of a greater Germany. The end of 12 years of Nazi rule. Then he signs, letter by letter, his name on the page. The war in Europe is over. At least on paper. The words are clear. All German forces on land, at sea, and in the air, in all theaters of operation, surrender unconditionally to the Allied High Command and to the Soviet High Command. The surrender will take effect at 11:01 p.m. Central European Time on May 8th. At that hour, the guns are to fall silent. The Americans record the moment with cameras. The images will enter history forever. Jodl rises after signing. He gives a military salute. Then he leaves the room. His mission is complete, but his own fate is not. A year later, he will stand trial at Nuremberg as a war criminal. For now, the news moves faster than armies. Radio networks flash the announcement across the world. Germany has surrendered. The war in Europe is over. But celebration must wait. The surrender will not take effect for more than 30 hours. Until then, in some places, fighting continues. Men are still dying in a war that is effectively over, but not yet officially ended. Part 5. Stalin demands Berlin. In Moscow, inside the Kremlin, Joseph Stalin listens to reports about the surrender ceremony at Reims. He is not pleased. To him, the arrangement is unacceptable. The Soviet representative at Reims appeared almost secondary. A witness, an observer, not the central victor. For Stalin, this is impossible. The Soviet Union has paid the highest price in the war. 27 million Soviet citizens are dead. Cities are destroyed. Villages are burned. Factories are ruined. Families have been torn apart from the Baltic to the Caucasus. And now Germany's surrender has taken place in France, with the Soviet presence appearing almost marginal. Stalin issues his order. The surrender ceremony must be repeated in Berlin, in the Soviet zone, with full Soviet authority. The Germans must surrender clearly and publicly before the Red Army. This is not only protocol, it is history. It is about how the world will remember who defeated Nazi Germany. But there is a problem. The news is already spread. Radio stations have announced the surrender. People in London, Paris, New York, and across Allied territory are already preparing to celebrate. German soldiers in the field have heard the news. Many are surrendering immediately, especially to the Americans and British. The race west accelerates. On May 7th, Thousands of German soldiers stream toward American lines in Austria, Bavaria, and Czechoslovakia. Anyone who can move tries to get to the western zones. The roads become more crowded than ever. Horse-drawn carts, military trucks, bicycles, ambulances, civilian wagons, columns of soldiers in uniform, others in civilian clothes, wounded men, nurses, administrative staff, officers trying to disappear, all move in the same direction, west, toward relative safety. American photographers capture extraordinary images. Endless human columns, convoys stretching for kilometers, faces drained by exhaustion and fear. This is surrender not as a parade, but as collapse. Part 6, Dönitz speaks. On May 8th, at 12:30 in the afternoon, Admiral Dönitz stands before a microphone in Flensburg. His voice is calm, but the words are heavy. He speaks to the German people. The war is over. The Reich has surrendered. The guns will fall silent that evening. His message is carefully shaped. He presents the surrender as a necessity. He says his first duty was to save German lives. Continuing the fight would only bring more death and destruction. Germany has lost the war, but the German people must survive. Dönitz does not speak like a revolutionary. He does not speak like Hitler. There is no promise of final victory, no call for fanatical resistance, no glorious death, only the sober language of defeat. The decision, he says, was difficult, but necessary. His government in Flensburg is a ghost government. Its authority is shrinking by the hour. The Allies will soon arrest its members and dissolve it completely. But in these final days, Dönitz still tries to shape the ending. Delay for the West. Surrender to the West. Escape the East. That is the last strategy of the Third Reich. Not victory, not even honor. Survival. Part 7. Victory in London. May 8th, 1945. London wakes to clear skies. By morning, the streets are already filling. People come out of their homes, offices, shelters, and factories. 5 years of war are ending. 5 years of blackout curtains, rationing, air raid sirens, telegrams of death, and waiting. Now at last, peace in Europe. British flags appear everywhere. Red, white, and blue fills the city. Trafalgar Square fills with thousands. Piccadilly Circus is packed. Whitehall becomes a river of people. Music plays from loudspeakers. People sing. They dance. They embrace strangers. For a brief moment, class, rank, uniform, and hardships seem to disappear. There is only relief. 5 years of fear are ending. At 3 p.m., Winston Churchill appears on the balcony of the Ministry of Health. The crowd roars. One name rises from hundreds of thousands of voices. Churchill, Churchill, Churchill. He is the man who led Britain in its darkest hour. The man who refused surrender when Britain stood alone. The man whose speeches gave language to endurance. Now he tastes victory. He waves to the crowd. He smiles. He raises his fingers in the famous V for victory sign. The cheers grow louder. This is the greatest triumph of his political life. But Churchill's mind is not free of concern. He knows Europe is shattered. The British Empire is exhausted. The Soviet Union is expanding. The future is uncertain. The victory is real. But peace will not be simple. In the evening, the royal family appears on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. King George VI, Queen Elizabeth, Princess Elizabeth, 19 years old, Princess Margaret, 15. The crowd before the palace cheers beneath lights that shine openly for the first time in years. The king speaks to the nation by radio. His voice is steady and reassuring. He thanks the British people for their endurance. He thanks the armed forces. He thanks the Allies. He reminds listeners of the terrible price paid. Hundreds of thousands of British lives have been lost. But freedom has survived. Democracy has endured. In Westminster Abbey, a service of thanksgiving is held. The Prime Minister, government ministers, and members of Parliament attend. The congregation sings. The words carry special meaning. The storm has passed. The safe harbor has been found. But the scars remain. London celebrates. Paris celebrates. New York celebrates. Across the Allied world, streets fill with joy. But the World War is not yet over. Japan is still fighting in the Pacific. There will be more death before the final peace. Part 8. Victory Day in the Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union, Victory Day is celebrated on May 9th. Because of the time difference, the German surrender takes effect after midnight Moscow time. For the West, victory is May 8th. For the Soviet Union, it is May 9th. In camps across Germany, liberated Soviet forced laborers celebrate. At Wiesbaden, thousands of men and women who had been forced to work in German factories gather together. Many are from Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. They have endured years of forced labor, hunger, humiliation, and fear. Now they are free. They sing Soviet songs. They wave red flags. They dance. A statement from Stalin is read aloud. It speaks of victory over fascism. It speaks of the sacrifices of the Soviet people. 27 million dead, more than any other country. Cities destroyed. Village burned. Economy shattered. But victory has come. Hitler, who wanted to destroy the Soviet Union, has been defeated in Berlin. In Karlshorst, in eastern Berlin, preparations are underway for the second surrender ceremony. The building, once a German military engineering school, has become Soviet headquarters. Now, it will witness the ceremony Stalin demanded. Germany will surrender before the Soviet command. At midnight on May 9th, the German delegation arrives. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel leads them. He wears his full uniform. Medals hang from his chest. He enters the room where Marshal Georgy Zhukov waits, alongside representatives of the other Allied powers. The ceremony is formal. Cold. There is no warmth. No courtesy. No forgiveness. Keitel signs. Zhukov receives the document. No handshake. No friendly words. Only signatures. The war that began on September 1st, 1939, with the invasion of Poland, has officially ended in Europe. 5 years and 8 months of war. Around 60 million dead across the world. In Moscow, celebrations continue until dawn. Red Square fills with people. Fireworks light the sky. The Soviet people celebrate, but the joy is mixed with grief. Almost every family has lost someone. Cities lie in ruins. Villages are gone. The road to reconstruction will be long and painful. Victory has come, but no one in the Soviet Union can forget its cost. Part 9. The Nazis try to escape. While Germany surrenders, some of the most important Nazi leaders try to disappear. Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, disguises himself as an ordinary soldier. He shaves his mustache. He wears an eye patch. He tries to vanish among millions of surrendering men. But his luck does not last. On May 23rd, British forces capture him at a checkpoint. Others go south toward Austria and Italy. The most careful begin planning longer routes. To South America, to the Middle East, to anywhere far from Europe. Secret networks help them. Some clergy provide false papers. Corrupt officials look the other way. Intelligence agencies begin to see value in certain former Nazis, especially those with knowledge of rockets, technology, the Soviet Union, or anti-communist networks. The Cold War is beginning before the Second World War has fully ended. German experts in weapons, missiles, intelligence, and science are now useful prizes. In Kitzingen, Germany, American cameramen encounter a famous German pilot, Hans Ulrich Rudel. He is the most decorated German pilot of the war, recipient of the Knight's Cross with golden oak leaves, swords, and diamonds. He surrenders to the Americans with his squadron. Rudel appears confident. He speaks smoothly. He presents himself as a professional soldier, not a political man, just a pilot who did his duty. The Americans treat him cautiously. They know he was a committed Nazi, but they also know he has valuable knowledge about air combat, tactics, and the Soviets. He will remain in captivity for a time, but receive relatively special treatment. Later, Rudel will leave Germany and go to Argentina. There, he will help other former Nazis escape and remain connected to far-right circles for decades. Another pilot, Adolf Galland, also surrenders. The former commander of Germany's fighter force will later go to Argentina as well, working as an advisor under Juan Perón. Argentina in the late 1940s and 1950s becomes a refuge for many Nazi fugitives. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, find their way there. The war is over. But its criminals are not all captured. Some will spend years, even decades, hiding under new names. Part 10. Goring in American hands. In Augsburg, on May 14th, American cameramen meet one of the most powerful surviving Nazis. A heavy man in his 50s walks toward the camera. He appears relaxed, almost cheerful. This is Hermann Goring, former deputy to Hitler, commander of the Luftwaffe, one of the most powerful men in the Third Reich. Goring has surrendered voluntarily to the Americans. He believes he will be treated as a defeated leader, not as a criminal. He imagines negotiations, perhaps a deal, perhaps cooperation with the Western Allies against the Soviets. He does not understand that the world has changed. The Nazis will not be treated as honorable opponents. They will be treated as criminals. In the interrogation camp at Augsburg, Goring tries to use charm. He speaks elegantly. He jokes. He tries to build relationships with American intelligence officers. He claims he knew nothing about the extermination camps. He claims he was focused only on military matters. It is a lie, but he performs it with confidence. A spontaneous press conference is held. Journalists listen with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. The writer Klaus Mann, working as an American correspondent in defeated Germany, describes Goring as a man with a face that shows brutality, but also a deceptive kind of friendliness. Goring tries to present himself as a military professional dragged into politics. He refuses responsibility for Nazi crimes. He blames others. Himmler, Goebbels, the extremists, the fanatics, but not himself. The Allies do not believe him. Goring will be tried at Nuremberg as one of the major war criminals. He will be convicted of crimes against humanity and sentenced to death. But on the night before his execution, he will swallow a smuggled cyanide capsule. He will cheat the hangman at the final moment. One last act of defiance from a man who never truly accepted guilt. Later, someone will recall Goring's attitude, as if he were saying, "The important thing is that I had 12 good years. 12 years of power. 12 years of wealth. 12 years of corruption. No real remorse for the millions who died. Only regret that the game had ended." Part 11. George Stevens enters Germany. By June 1945, American film director George Stevens and his team are on the road to Berlin. They have spent weeks waiting for permission. Now the Allies have agreed on the division of Berlin into occupation sectors. The Americans, British, and French will enter their zones. Stevens receives authorization to film. First, he stops in Hamburg, the great port city on the North Sea. Once one of Germany's most important commercial centers, is devastated. Around 80% of the port area is destroyed. Docks are shattered. Ships lie sunk in waterways. Cranes are twisted by heat and explosions. Commerce has stopped. Stevens and his crew walk through empty streets. Buildings are cracked. Windows are broken. Walls are scarred by bullets and shells. Only a few people move outside. Their faces are pale and tired. They walk quickly. They look at the ground. They avoid the camera. Hamburg had already known catastrophe before the end of the war. In the summer of 1943, during Operation Gamara, Allied bombers struck the city with devastating fire raids. Incendiary bombs created firestorms. Heat rose to unimaginable levels. Hot winds sucked oxygen from the streets and shelters. Tens of thousands died in a single night. A modern city became an inferno. The German writer Hans Erich Nosack, who lived in Hamburg, later wrote that standing where one had lived for years, where now nothing remained, was not merely difficult. It was incomprehensible. The weight was too heavy to describe. Now, in 1945, Hamburg tries to rise from the ashes. People search for shelter, for food, for a way to survive. The economy has collapsed. Jobs are gone. Trade is broken. The black market becomes the real economy. Cigarettes are worth more than money. A pack of cigarettes may be more valuable than a stack of banknotes. In early July, Stevens leaves Hamburg and heads toward Berlin. The drive across the Elbe and through the occupation routes is crowded with Allied columns. Tanks, trucks, jeeps, military police, engineers. Occupation forces are moving into the German capital. Stevens still has enough color 16mm film to document Berlin and the coming conference at Potsdam. What he records will become part of the visual memory of the end of the war. Part 12. Potsdam and the New World. July 1945. Sicilienhof Palace in Potsdam, on the outskirts of Berlin. The building is large and elegant, built in an English country style, surrounded by gardens, fountains, and trees. But the peaceful setting hides enormous tension. Here, the big three will meet to decide the fate of post-war Europe. Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union, Harry Truman of the United States, Winston Churchill of Britain. The conference begins on July 17th. The atmosphere is formal and cold. Stalin arrives surrounded by heavy security. Truman arrives as the new president of the most powerful industrial country in the world. Churchill appears tired but determined to protect British interests. Three men, three visions. The future of Europe is at stake. The first question is Germany. What should be done with the country that has unleashed 2 world wars in 30 years? How can it be prevented from threatening the world again? How can it be punished without creating the conditions for a new disaster? The lesson of Versailles after the First World War is still present. Punishment without stability can produce extremism. Stalin's agenda is clear. He wants reparations. He wants German factories moved to the Soviet Union. Machines, tools, railway equipment, industrial plants. The Soviet Union has been devastated, and he wants Germany to pay. 27 million Soviet dead, thousands of towns and villages destroyed. The bill is enormous. Truman is cautious. He understands that completely impoverishing Germany may create new problems. Europe needs German industry to recover. German coal, steel, factories, and transport networks were central to the European economy. Destroy Germany entirely, and all Europe may suffer. But Germany must also be punished and disarmed. The balance is difficult. The final decision: Germany will be divided into 4 occupation zones. The Soviets in the east, the Americans, British, and French in the west and southwest. Berlin itself, though located deep inside the Soviet zone, will also be divided into 4 sectors. A western island inside an eastern sea. This decision will create enormous problems later. Germany will be completely demilitarized. The German army will be dissolved. The weapons industry dismantled. Factories that produce tanks, aircraft, and guns will be destroyed or converted to civilian production. A program of denazification will begin. Every official, every teacher, every judge, every civil servant, each must answer questions. Were you a member of the Nazi Party? What role did you play? What did you do? But denazification will prove much harder than anyone expects. Millions of Germans were party members, some by conviction, many to keep their jobs, others under pressure. How should guilt be measured? Who should be punished? Who should be forgiven? The process will last for years. Hundreds of thousands of cases will be examined. The second question at Potsdam is Eastern Europe. Here, the divisions become clear. The Red Army occupies Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and parts of Austria. Stalin has no intention of leaving. He wants a buffer zone between the Soviet Union and Germany. He will not allow a third invasion from the West. Churchill is deeply alarmed. He sees the future more clearly than most. Eastern Europe is falling under Soviet control. Communism is expanding. The balance of Europe is changing. A year later, in a famous speech, he will say that an iron curtain has descended across the continent, from the Baltic to the Adriatic, a line dividing east from west. Truman is also uneasy, but he has a card Stalin does not yet officially know he holds. On July 16th, just before the Potsdam Conference begins, the first atomic bomb test succeeds in the desert of New Mexico. The Manhattan Project has worked. The United States now possesses a weapon that can destroy an entire city with a single bomb. Truman tells Stalin indirectly that America has developed a powerful new weapon. Stalin appears calm. He shows little reaction. But in truth, Stalin already knows. His spies inside the American nuclear program have informed him for years. The nuclear arms race has begun before the war has even fully ended. The third question is the trial of war criminals. The Allies agree that major Nazi leaders must be tried publicly, not only as punishment, but as documentation. The world must see. The world must know. The crimes must be exposed. The documents must be shown. The films must be screened. So no one can deny. So no one can forget. Nuremberg is chosen as the site of the trials. The city where the Nazis held their massive rallies. The city where the racial Nuremberg laws were announced in 1935. Now, it will become the place where the men who built the system will face judgment. 22 major defendants will sit in the dock. Göring, Hess, Ribbentrop, Keitel, Jodl, and others. Judges from the four Allied powers. Prosecutors, defense attorneys. A trial lasting months. Documents, witnesses, films from the camps. The world will watch and recoil. At Potsdam, another surprise arrives. On July 26th, the results of the British election are announced. The Labour Party has won. Churchill has lost. The man who led Britain through the war is replaced before the conference ends. Clement Attlee arrives to take his place. The change is dramatic, but British policy remains largely the same. The conference ends on August 2nd. The final declaration is long and complex. Germany, Poland, reparations, Bachlimus, occupation. But the most important decision is not written openly in the conference statement. Truman has decided to use the atomic bomb against Japan. On August 6th, Hiroshima is destroyed. On August 9th, Nagasaki. On August 15th, Japan surrenders. The Second World War is finally over. But the world has changed forever. The nuclear age has begun. The Cold War is waiting. The United Nations is founded to prevent a third world war. But the world is divided into two camps, East and West, communism and capitalism, a struggle that will last 45 years. Part 13, Germany after the fall. For ordinary Germans, life after surrender is brutally hard. Berlin is rubble. 9 out of 10 buildings are destroyed or damaged. People live in basements. Electricity is absent. Water supplies are broken. Food is rare. Ration cards provide barely enough to survive. The black market thrives. Cigarettes become currency. Women work clearing rubble. They will become known as the Trümmerfrauen, the rubble women. They form human chains to move bricks. They clean and stack usable bricks. Slowly, painfully, the cities begin to recover. Roads are cleared. Buildings are patched. Life resumes, but with enormous difficulty. The collapse of Nazi Germany is not only political, it is moral. A society that followed Hitler must now face what was done in its name. The camps, the deportations, the executions, the war of extermination. The ruins outside are visible. The ruins inside will take longer to understand. From this devastation, a new Germany will eventually be born. In 1949, two German states are created. West Germany, democratic and aligned with the West. East Germany, communist and controlled by the Soviet bloc. The division will last 40 years. But West Germany will later experience an economic miracle in the 1950s. Factories will rise again. Cities will be rebuilt. A defeated nation will become a major democratic and economic power. East Germany will rebuild too, but under a different system behind the Iron Curtain. Germany will remain divided until 1989, when the Berlin Wall falls. But the roots of that division lie here, in the ruins of 1945, in the decisions at Potsdam, in the zones of occupation, in the mistrust between allies who had defeated Hitler together but could not agree on the shape of peace. Conclusion: the meaning of May 1945. 8 days in May 1945 changed the world. Hitler was dead. Berlin had fallen. Germany surrendered. Europe celebrated. Nazi leaders fled, lied, or faced justice. The Allies divided the defeated Reich. The Soviet Union emerged as a superpower. The United States entered the nuclear age. The British Empire, though victorious, was exhausted. A new Europe began to take shape from the ruins. But war does not end simply because the shooting stops. Its consequences continue for decades. Borders shift. Families remain broken. Cities must be rebuilt. The dead must be counted. The guilty must be judged. The survivors must learn how to live again. The Second World War left humanity with a terrible lesson. Civilization can collapse. Modern nations can become engines of destruction. Propaganda can turn neighbors into enemies. Power without limits can lead to catastrophe. But there is another lesson too. Human beings can rebuild. From rubble, cities can rise. From dictatorship, democracy can emerge. From hatred, cooperation can be created. Modern Germany, rebuilt after ruin, became a democratic nation that confronted its past with unusual seriousness. Europe, once torn apart by war, slowly moved toward cooperation. The European Union would one day grow from the belief that peace must be built not only by treaties, but by shared institutions, shared economies, and shared responsibility. The lesson is clear. Cooperation is better than conquest. Peace is more valuable than victory. And the cost of forgetting history is always higher than the pain of remembering it. In May 1945, the guns fell silent in Europe. But the echoes of those days still shape the world we live in. The fall of Berlin, the surrender at Reims, the ceremony in Karlshorst, the celebrations in London and Moscow, the ruins of Hamburg and Berlin, the meetings at Potsdam, the trials at Nuremberg, all of them formed the bridge between one world and the next. The war ended, but history did not pause. From the ashes of the Third Reich came a divided Europe, a nuclear age, a Cold War, and eventually a new dream of peace. And that is why those 8 days may still matter. They were not only the end of Nazi Germany, they were the beginning of the world we still inhabit today.